we would have had the same types of friends just being like, hey, like, can you explain to me what an ETF is? Do you have a line of credit? Like, what's the interest rate? They have all these questions, and then they just bury them in like a corner of shame. Everybody thinks that everybody else knows stuff, and it's just not true. There's a client of mine who, between the two of them, had saved $150,000 for a down payment in Toronto. So they had done all the right things. And then just being like, we were so embarrassed to ever talk to anyone because we thought we were doing everything wrong. Everybody else in the area is clearly doing things right. They're buying houses. We can't afford one. And I was like, holy shit, like, you guys have done everything right. And the fact that you're getting outbid on $800,000 or $900,000 place, like, that's Toronto. But nobody took the time to kind of say, like, that's not normal.
This is the Personal Finance Show.
Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. Darryl Brown wants you to stop complaining about bad financial advice and do something about it. If you walk into a bank, give them money, don't ask questions, and do zero research on investing, then you've pretty much given up your right to complain if you're not happy with the results. Instead of complaining about things, let's be proactive. This is your money. It's important. You work hard for it, so why not spend a bit of time on it? Yes, I've said this a lot. I know it's hard to do the work yourself. It takes time and a personal interest in investing. So it might make more sense for you to pay someone a fee to help you figure it all out. And this is where a lot of people get confused. They think that walking into a bank or going to a company that sells financial products is the best way to invest their money in a way that achieves their financial goals. They don't charge upfront fees, so that sounds great to most people. But as I've said many times, if a financial services company doesn't have the product that is best for your goals, they're not going to tell you to go somewhere else. They're never going to make money if they send business away. If you walk into a Mazda dealer and you start talking about how much Ford means to you and you love Ford products, and it becomes really obvious to them that you're going to have a significantly better life if you buy a Ford, they will never say, I don't think a Mazda is the right car for you. As a salesperson, that's possibly the worst thing you can do for your career. They'll instead try their best to change your mind and fit your desires into their available range of products. Darryl Brown started his company, You and Yours Financial, so that he could provide truly unbiased advice. He's not interested at all in forcing you into a box so that you fit the financial product he sells. He doesn't sell financial products at all. A quick glance at Darryl's Twitter feed and you can see that he has no patience for the financial BS that's out there. Darryl's only interested in providing you with a completely unbiased opinion and an investment solution that is truly right for you. Darryl joined me in the studio in Hamilton to share his personal finance story.
Easily earliest money memory is just the recollection that my parents kept on saying over and over again that it was a recession. There's a recession going on. You can't get that. We can't do this. There was a recession.
So they just kept, like, they're telling you, how old are you?
I'm 8-ish.
So they're telling an
7-year-old. I'm
8-year-old.
7 or 8. And beyond...
There's a recession.
Yeah. Beyond, like, kind of basic money things. The real part, when I kind of understood, like, started to kind of understand that money was a little bit more complex and more of a thing, was when I was like, oh, there's a recession going on. We can't spend money. Like, I can't roll up with like a list of 20 things I want from Consumers Distributing, like, for Christmas.
Consumers.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that reference in so long.
Yeah, it's. I pulled it up. I think I tweeted once, like a few months ago, about the fact that, like, I think I made the argument that, like, inflation isn't that. Inflation is a little bit weirdly calculated, just because you would see, like, video games or whatever in there, and they're like $80 right
Sure.
back then. Inflation adjusted, they should be like $300 or $250 by now, and they're actually still, like, relatively affordable.
Well, some things, like, are impacted and some things aren't, right?
Yeah.
Is that how it goes?
For sure. Yeah, I think some of the things that have been able to be sourced, like, elsewhere in the world, and I think this all kind of came into play with like the inverted yield curve talk, and just with interest rates being connected to inflation. I think I was just, making the consideration that, there's some prices that are probably flat, if not falling, over time, and
maybe they're increasing, but then they figure out more efficient ways of making
totally.
them.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, and it evens itself out. You can't. Well, maybe you can find a more efficient way to like make milk or bread or other staples, but mostly they're going to just go up with inflation.
Yeah, and I think it's the story of I've been really consumed the last number of years with technology and the impact that it has on an economy and like productive goods and prices. And I think it's a story that doesn't really get told that often. That I think a lot of people blame economic woes or industry, like the kind of decline of industry, the decline of labor. They blame it on free trade agreements. They blame it on the fact that, like NAFTA was around and that we can source stuff from all over the world.
Globalization.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Which is fair. That's legit. And I don't think the part gets told about, how much technology, impacts both the price of goods. We can produce things, the same amount of goods or more with less labor involved and for cheaper. And I don't think that story gets told, and I don't think the story gets told of how much that displaces labor. And I think that is starting to come out a little bit, but it's weird to sort of see kind of constantly a lot of angst against free trade agreements and trade in general, when I think technology is a big component of it, but really difficult to understand, I think, and pinpoint. So
we got here from consumers distributing,
inflating
the cost of video games when you were, say, 8 years old.
Yeah.
But we should explain that. It was like you go there, there's nothing there. It's not a store. You just go look in the catalog.
Desk. Yeah.
A desk with the catalog.
Yeah.
Kind of like if you were looking the Sears catalog or whatever. But there's just all this, like, usually electronics and games and stuff.
Yeah.
And then they would ship it there.
Yeah.
I don't even know if people know this thing. It's not a thing anymore.
Well, I think you and I think we're, what are we, Zennials? Like we're like 35 to 40-ish?
Xennials,
yeah,
whatever it's called.
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe...
I like your abbreviated, like you made it a word, a Zennial, like Xavier.
I'm trying to be cool.
No, I like it, because maybe that is how we should say it. I say Xennial because it's a combo of Generation X and Millennial.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of like lets people know, like, oh, what are you talking about? Well, I'm right on the cusp.
Yeah.
Right?
What year are you born?
80.
Okay, so you're literally right on the cusp. And I'm 82.
82.
And I've seen some definitions that cut off at 80, some at 82.
You're actually closer. You're probably part of some of the definitions. I'm like one of the fringe definitions. People will give me millennial. They'll be like, yeah, you're a millennial. Yeah. Look at your long hair, and you don't use your phone to talk to people.
Yeah. It's a little bit weird trying to figure out the sort of stereotypes between generations, and I know Lisa said all along that like millennials need to be split into two. It's like it's just things change so fast.
What's the span? Is it 20 years?
It's supposed to be about 20 years for each one.
How could somebody like 20 years younger than you like have the same, like maybe sure, if you were starting of the internet age, I guess, right? That's the idea. Also, we remember all of the Gen X stuff, right? Nintendo came out, and
it's amazing. It's an amazing perspective to have.
Born before Apple Macintosh was created, even, right?
Yeah,
like
if
Apple's,
you wanted to, if you wanted to listen to a song, and you didn't pony up $18 for the CD, you had to hang out on Napster, on dial-up, hoping that nobody picked up the phone, and then like maybe overnight you'd get it in the morning or something like that. But like, it's an amazing perspective to have, the sort of like kind of pre-digital everything, being comfortable with it. I think at this point, compared to a lot of folks who are may not know, grown up with CDs or radio or whatever it is, having to wait on the radio station to listen to a song that you want to hear, or wait and listen to it to hear it on the TV or whatever. It's so different. So let's go back to 8-year-old Darryl, who has been being told about the recession. And did that mean anything to you? Like, did it change your behavior? Like, you don't get enough any more allowance, or like how did that impact you? Well, I think it was a perspective I didn't hear anywhere else, and so I was like, well, what's going on here? And it kind of made me a little bit aware of the fact that my parents may not have embraced consumerism compared to a lot of other people around. They're Jamaican immigrants.
Okay.
And where they grew up, how they grew up, their perspective, they're just like, it's not stuff that we do. We just save, and they kind of put away money.
So saving was the big thing for them.
Saving was a big thing because there was always a recession. There was always a rainy day coming. You just didn't know when. So that really framed a lot of my upbringing. I mean, like they were solely middle class. My dad sold medical equipment to hospitals and universities, and my mom worked at Grand River Hospital as a dietary supervisor before the layoffs and the cuts in the early 90s.
Oh, okay.
So there was an impact when it came to the economy. There was an awareness that you should definitely kind of save for a rainy day, and I carry a bit of that with me right now.
Yeah, it's better than like, let's spend all of our money because we're gonna always be good at making money forever.
Yeah,
which is really what most Canadians have in their head, running in their head. Like, why do I need to save? I can earn my money back next week.
Yeah. It's
you might not be able to though.
Yeah, and the saving mentality is really what allowed both Lisa and I to leave our corporate jobs. So this is later on, and I'll get back to it.
We can jump ahead and then jump back.
All right.
Tangents are fine.
Totally. It allowed us to leave our jobs, basically. We, at the time, saved up enough money that we were like, okay, we can pay our bills and figure out things for a couple of years, max.
So temporary financial independence.
Temporarily. I'll get back to that, too, because I had an interview with Rob Carrick at the Globe, who I think is awesome. I think he does a really great job at covering a really challenging industry. And we talked about FIRE. He asked me, he's like, hey, let's have a conversation about financially independent retire early, which is this thing in case people don't know. And for me, I kind of thought, it's not really about being independent for forever and retiring early for forever.
So let's jump into FIRE later. Also, just heard David Bach. He wants it to be FIGHT, financially independent, transition early. So we can discuss that one too.
Yeah, that's a very good one.
So you're saving, your parents are saving, you're getting this by osmosis.
Yeah.
But when do you actually get money of your own? When does that happen?
Maybe I got a bit of an allowance, but I definitely had a job with the Guelph Tribune, delivering papers.
Yeah.
12, 13-ish.
And your parents would have insisted that you save that money?
Yeah, I think they were sort of like, you can do what you want with it, but you should probably save it. Like they're like, you can go buy that, but you won't have any money, and they kind of guilt you into it and make you feel a little bit
so
insecure.
That was always their behavior. Like, okay, if you want, like, smoke the whole pack of cigarettes. You know, go ahead.
Yeah, go buy like 200 like penny candies. Go buy like 10 packs of baseball cards. Go get the Upper Deck pack. Go get the more expensive stuff. Yeah, go do that. And they would be like, you can do that if you want to, but they left me with a lot of discretion, a lot of choice, and trying to figure that out. My mom got laid off in the early 90s, and then eventually started working part-time with Primerica, and it is kind of around now. Not, I think, and maybe not nearly as big as it was in its heyday.
There's one on Main Street here.
So it's still...
or one of them, like they're selling investments?
Their big thing is mutual fund sales.
Yes.
The big tag is like buy term, invest the difference. They're the mutual fund driver, and they were at the time for Citigroup, a big channel. For it, and that was my first connect to financial services as a career, or understanding what it meant to be dependent on your work or your job to pay your bills. And their whole thing was like, gain financial independence. I think their mentality was financial independence was like, you are your own economic engine. You control your own business, basically, because where you wanted to be, or where they push you to be as someone who did well in Primerica was you kind of managed a team of a number of different people below you, and you'd collect residuals on top of them. So you're effectively collecting passive income.
Like, it's a multi-level marketing sort of. I always try to explain multi-level marketing doesn't immediately mean some kind of scheme. It's just a method, right? And a lot of companies are structured this way, where you recruit people and then they recruit other people and you get a percentage, right? So that's your mom got in there early?
She got in there early, and I did it part-time. Not, there are people who did full-time and kind of went to the moon and back with it, and it got me involved in it. I did my mutual funds license. I thought I was going to become a Primerica. How
early is this?
I was 18 or so.
Okay, just because your mom was there, you're like, I can...
She was there.
I'll do this.
I was interested in it. I saw it as a path to... not working as hard as they did, frankly.
Sure.
Like, yeah.
Hey, yeah, why not?
Yeah,
right?
so, I gave that a go, and I switched. I thought I was going to, I played a lot of sports when I was growing up. I was lots of competitive soccer, and I thought I was going to do kinesiology, and then I was like, oh, let's do this business thing, because everybody seems to make a lot of money, and they don't seem to stress out about money as much as we do. So I eventually got into... I think I applied to 4 programs, got into Western, and I got into Mac. And, Mac was close, and it was, a really good program, I thought. I didn't think a whole lot of Hamilton back then. I think it's an amazing city now. After having been here,
pretty cool now.
I can go on an entire Hamilton tangent as well too.
We'll table that. We'll have another Hamilton fest.
Hamilton Love Fest, I think.
Yeah, we'll do that. So you how did you pay for school?
So school for me was basically tuition was me primarily.
Okay.
And my parents, after they covered everything, I think. Actually, I remember it. The first year, I think they had everything more or less covered. They're like, you got in, you got your first year, that's fine. The second year, they were kind of like, there was a bit of a trade-off. They were like, we're a little bit, concerned about you, getting housing in the area. And my dad, who, kind of grew up, went to university in the 60s and was worried about housing discrimination, like incredibly worried about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
I think he had in his mind that, based on his experience, it was possible, for lack of, enforceable laws or whatever, that you could show at a place and be like, hey, I want to rent here. And someone would be like, well, look at you, and kind of be like, oh, do listeners know I'm a black dude, by the way? I guess we'll have it on the...
like your photo will be plastered on the episode.
Fantastic.
So people will know. But, I mean, that people don't necessarily look at the cover. So,
okay,
I mean, it's fair to explain that.
There you go.
Right?
I am. Yeah. There you go. So I think they were genuinely worried about that, and they're like, "Well, we don't want to be. This is the thing we're concerned about. Let's talk about it."
Yeah.
We ended up in a place where they thought it was. They presented the idea. They're like, "We can figure out a way to buy a house in the area, and the trade-off is this: that if we can figure out a way to put money down for it, you can manage it, and you can live there rent-free, effectively." Tuition is still you. You figure out your tuition, you figure out books, you figure out all your other living expenses and whatnot. So at the time in Hamilton, in Westdale, so just around the corner from here, houses were 185-ish thousand.
Okay, that sounds pretty good.
With 5 or 6 bedrooms.
Yeah.
And they would shoot out like $2,400 in cash. So having done a first year of business, I was able to model it and figure it out. Like, this is something that could be sustainable and work.
Yeah, of course.
So it was a bit of a mix. I was there. I lived rent-free in exchange for managing the property.
Yeah,
effectively.
So then you were able to fill, 5 others? Or
able to
4
fill
others?
Another 5 rooms.
Wow.
Consistently for the extra 4 years that we kept it. And they actually just sold that property last year.
Wow,
I think it was. They kept it for a period of time, and
so maybe 15 years.
About that, yeah. And it was a mix of primarily them managing it, me trying to fill the rooms. Like, I would be the online person who would
see. Okay, you're the contact.
Exactly. I'd be the marketing person. I would find people, figure out where to post it on Facebook or on the McMaster off-campus site, and get the rooms filled. They would do a lot of the in-person stuff because I was working full-time in Toronto. Like, they would, kind of maybe do casual gardening or casual cleaning up. And it's kind of a nice semi-retirement project for them to do.
So they had money to put down as a down payment on this? It wouldn't be that much, of course.
They had, so they would have had an inheritance from like a property that they sold years ago, like from Jamaica, I think. Okay. And it might have been like $15,000.
Okay. Yeah.
So back then, that got you fairly close to enough for a down payment. And right around that time, I mean, we were approaching the sort of 0% down 40-year mortgage.
Because this is
period.
Early 2000s, probably.
It is.
Right?
It's early 2000s.
Like 2000 or
2002.
2002.
Yeah.
And so people are coming up with these concepts of 0 down 30-year.
You could get shortly after that. You could buy a home with literally 0 money down. You could finance the entire thing, and you could amortize it over 40 years.
40. So we got all the way up to in Canada.
In Canada.
We got to 40.
We got to 40.
That is crazy. So financial crisis happens, of course, because of that. Not only because of that, but it was one of the main reasons.
Things got, in all fairness, I think got out of hand. Definitely south of the border.
Yeah, more so. Yeah.
Yeah, here is, I mean, as crazy as things were in the States, I think there's a few really key points for Canada. Number one, mortgages in Canada are generally recourse, which means, so what I think the biggest problem in the States is that people, if they were underwater on the mortgages, they just handed back the keys to the bank.
Yeah.
So you can do that. The only recourse the lender had in the States at that time was, okay, if you're underwater, if we want to recapture the property, they only have the property as an asset, whereas in Canada, they would go after you for the difference. If they were to capture it, sell it, and there was a gap.
Okay, so we have laws that enable
the rules,
that.
Yeah, the rules are more prudent for sure in Canada on a number of fronts. You can't deduct mortgage interest in Canada.
Yeah.
Which I think is a big one. I think I've heard a lot from my U.S. colleagues at the time.
IRS,
Exactly. Well, they would just buy gigantic houses for the tax write-offs.
Deduct the interest.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Just for
so,
that reason.
So there's a number of reasons where Canada weathered that storm, I think, a lot better. Anyways, I mean, back to
So a couple of things. How did you pay for your tuition?
Well,
are you working at Primerica?
I'm not. I'm not at the time. I did have a few jobs at school. I had a job as a student parking officer.
Okay. Yeah.
Got paid fairly well for that.
Sure.
I was not very well liked.
No. No one wants. You're the one that writes the tickets.
Yeah. That was me. That was me.
Okay.
So I did that for I think a couple of semesters. I worked as an admin assistant in one of the executive offices there.
Okay.
And also had a job as a TA.
Wow. So how do you get a job as a TA?
I managed to somehow do fairly well in a couple of exams. I think finance exams. I mean, actually, and it was a course that a lot of people really liked and did well. They needed TA that summer, and a lot of people go. The other thing too is a lot of people go away for the summer because I was basically at that home. I was like, well, I'm going to stay in
home. Yeah,
I'm going to stay here and hang out in Hamilton and enjoy the summers in Hamilton and Hess Village in the summer, which is fantastic. It's a little more calm right now. Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's not so insane as it is.
It's not frantic during the school year.
Yeah. Where was home? Where were your parents?
They're in Guelph.
Okay, yeah.
So that's where. Yeah.
So not far. We have a highway 6.
Highway 6.
Connects.
Yeah.
They're basically almost like Hamilton goes all the way up to Guelph. And that's where the city limits are. I know this because I drive Uber, and I have this big area that it basically goes all the way to Guelph that I can drive in. Okay, so they're not far, which probably made them feel better about buying this house. So they could at least come and check it out if they wanted. Yeah, you're managing it. You guys are paying mortgage plus though. Like you're getting some income off of this.
We're at that point it is
right?
It is doing very well. To the point where once we finished school, we thought it might be a strategy to buy a second or third or we don't know, which we actually did for a period of time. Okay. And it got too much. And then we backed away from doing that.
Okay.
But I stuck around. It enabled me to get that job, being a teaching assistant.
Yeah.
Even with those three
even
with those 3 jobs, I finished with $25,000 in student debt.
Okay. So you had, was it OSAP?
Wasn't OSAP, it was the education line of credit from one of the banks.
One of the banks, yeah. Yeah, because maybe you wouldn't have qualified for OSAP.
Definitely would not have qualified.
Well, they were making decent money doing, both employed.
One at that time, only one.
Oh yeah, of course, your mom.
Yeah, at that time,
then she was doing part-time in Primerica.
Yeah, I think and she wouldn't have been making a ton of money from that. But at that point, it became sort of aware and sensitive to I think it's a challenge for kind of the middle. Kind of, I don't know if you want to broadly call it, sort of middle income folks,
sure.
And at least then in Ontario, I'm not sure how it is now. I can't imagine it being much better with who and government. But like, if you're fairly well off, you can pay for school. Somebody can pay for school. You can pay for room and board. You can pay for it all. You're fine. If you have a what's qualified as as a low income, you can qualify for OSAP and maybe grants or bursaries. And then kind of in the middle, it's a bit of a challenge. I mean, I was very aware at that time that my parents were, they were utilizing their financial resources and probably sacrificing a bit of their retirement stability.
Yeah.
That plays into a little bit of kind of my focus on retirement now, from a practice standpoint. But I was kind of aware that, parents at that time and probably now face this challenge, post-secondary education or your retirement.
They're giving up. They might be able to retire, but the States, it's happening all the time in the States because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
And they're basically foregoing their retirement.
I don't know how it works in the States in terms of how people manage to make
student debt. That's what it is.
It is.
You think there's no way. Like that's why they have $1 trillion in student debt. I feel like I've been talking about this so much in episodes lately, and I was like just not aware of the epidemic in the States, and it just comes up all the time now because it's more clear to me now how crippling it can be. We got lucky. We are lucky to be in a place where tuition, what was it? $5 grand? $5 grand, right? So, you did 4 years, so $25 grand. So you paid for some. Your living expenses maybe would have been like your total cost would have been 10 grand a year, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say
about that?
Yeah. So you were able to maybe make 15 and have 25 left over. Is that the basic math on that one?
Yeah. I mean, you were paying basically somewhere between 11 and 13,000 per year. Times 4, it's a little over $50K.
Yeah.
And you're able to chip away at that through OSAP and whatever minimal scholarships maybe you can get, a few $100 here or there. And coming out with 25 grand, I used to have like my colleagues at Sun Life, some of them were in the States, like, well, how much is school in university in Canada?
Yeah.
Isn't it free? And I'm like, no. Like, yeah, it's
We're not Ireland.
It's like $5,000, and they're like, oh, it's free. So coming away with 25 grand in student debt it's a lot. Like, it's not nothing, but it's absolutely not.
It's very low for Americans.
I think
their average is 40, or not average, maybe minimum if they have debt is around in the 40s, and then of course it can be out at the hundreds.
Yeah, I think that's the. I think lawyers. That number gets. Yeah, the average skews the fact that there are people on the outer limits who would have literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, and their student loan payments are.
And it would take decades to pay it back. Like, even if you have a good job. Yeah. So you're coming out of school with 25 grand in debt. You have this income property. You didn't even have to pay rent. That's, yeah. So what were you charging about 600 person? 400, 600, 500?
For rent, about 400 a person.
Yeah.
Ish. Yeah.
To get to
like my 20. Room was tiny. It was literally the baby's room in the house. It was like 9 by 8. And I was like, there's an opportunity cost for me, to be in a bigger room. I'm going to take this one. This makes sense.
So, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, at school, if you're paying 400 in rent, that's actually, so that's about $5 grand a year.
It's $5 grand a year, yeah.
And so you technically saved 20 grand.
Yep.
Oh no, the first year you paid, right?
Yep.
So 15 grand, and so you could have had more debt
for sure,
but your parents kind of took that
for
on.
Sure.
And they did the down payment and all that,
yep.
right? And so. Now, did you stay here in Hamilton?
I stayed for a few months. I got a job at a company called Smurfit MBI. They make corrugated boxes.
Okay, and we make a lot of things here in Hamilton. It seems.
and that was the only job I could get. I was like, I need to find something. I was applying for general labor jobs on like East Barton Street. Like, I needed to get a job.
Really?
Oh yeah.
So you have a business degree now?
I have a business degree, and it just seemed like everybody else managed to kind of scoop up a position. So I grabbed this customer service gig. A few months after that, I applied to a job at Allstate in Markham. And that was when I moved out because I got that job and I worked in their financial planning group. At that time, I started working on my CFA, my Chartered Financial Analyst designation. And while I was studying, ran into a guy who I used to go to school with, worked at a company called DBRS, one of the 3/4 main credit rating agencies for companies out there.
Gotcha.
So they're in the business of basically providing a credit report for companies that issue debt. So I ran into him at the library. He said, we've got a job for you. Great. Started in 2007, early-ish, like months before the financial crisis.
Yes.
Yep.
So did you get to keep that job?
I was actually, I hate saying it this way, I was kind of it benefited me a little bit in a way. I was kind of newer-ish and obviously not the highest
That's right.
paid of the folk there. So
yeah, no, they got to fire other people who are worth more.
We showed up at work one day and 1/3 of our office was gone. Wow.
Really?
It was really freaking. I won't forget that day. And it just, as it turned out, a lot of the work that had to get done around there, was the new folks kind of doing it. They're like, well, here you go. You're writing this now. You're writing a credit report on Chevron, which is literally like my first, I think, credit that I wrote. And I mean, it's just okay when you just jump in and get her done. And it was an amazing.
Explain this because I think people might be aware of credit reporting for individuals, but maybe not so much for business. So how are you writing this credit report, and then what is it used for?
So there's an existing. Generally, these reports get refreshed quarterly or annually, in a lot of cases. So there's a document out there. I'm not creating it from scratch.
Yeah,
but I am having to go back through and go through all of the quarterly earnings releases or annual releases, press releases, interviews that people do on TV, reading through their annual reports, reading through what other analysts have to say about the company. And then we're also interviewing the management teams to understand what they're doing, how they're spending their money. Do they expect to use debt to finance their projects?
No, that's really detailed.
It's extraordinarily detailed.
Yeah.
You end up understanding companies on a level where you're basically just be able to chat back and forth with company executives about all of the nitty-gritty things that they're doing. So I did that for 3 years there, and I covered the oil and gas sector. So there's companies that explore for and extract oil and gas in Canada and throughout the world. We covered pipelines, which became huge in the news now. It's incredible to see that.
Yeah, really.
And regulated utilities, Enbridge Gas and Union Gas, and those are big utilities in Ontario that distribute natural gas for home heating. And infrastructure projects like the Toronto Airport is financed heavily by publicly issued bonds, 407.
So you're giving them all a rating, then?
I'm giving them all a credit rating.
What's the worst rating you ever gave somebody? You remember?
I think we might have. These are all very well-rated companies.
Yeah,
they're all what
so,
are called
right?
investment-grade companies.
Sure.
And my sector in particular that I covered, utilities, pipelines, they tend to be fairly well-rated by comparison to some of the other ones. The lowest would have been like a BBB low company. Which is still investment grade, like borderline.
And what like they're just not managing their company very well?
Just the nature of the business with unregulated power generation companies. They're producing power, but your revenues are subject both to the price somebody else is paying for power,
risk out there,
and then also the quantity of power that's being produced. So, for instance, the power generator, I can tell you, it's TransAlta, which is a power generator in Alberta, and they have both the issue of being unregulated, being exposed to the oil and gas sector, which is a very volatile industry. If prices go down, then there's less quantity of energy being used, and people aren't paying as much for energy. So that would have been kind of like the lowest rated.
So you're just learning a lot about businesses. I mean, this has obviously a connection to investing. Before we get there, how are your personal finances at this time? You have $25,000 in debt. You're getting these jobs.
So I finished school with $25,000 in debt. I got just a basic junior 1-bedroom in Toronto for $850. I was making $45,000 at the time. I still kind of don't spend a whole lot.
Yeah,
went from 45 to like 53 to 50. So I got out of like my student debt part like relatively quick.
You're
like
living like a student. You're not inflating your life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't change at all.
Okay.
Like there was no. And then when I paid that off, then I changed, and then I was like, okay, like we're gonna
free.
Yeah, and then we can go out in Kensington Market, and this round's on me, and this round's on me. Like,
but that's kind of true. You do have the freedom.
Yeah.
Because it's your money. You can choose to spend it or save it.
Yeah, my only liability was my all-inclusive rent at $850.
Yes. So as long as you have your rent, that can work for a couple of years.
Yeah.
We might be jumping ahead, but when did you sort of figure out maybe I should be saving some of this, or were you saving?
I was saving not as fast as I could have been.
Yeah.
So I was, enjoying myself there. Like I'm from Guelph. Now I'm living in Toronto. Like this is cool. Like I'm going to say yes to everything. So maybe, a couple years after that when, kind of 26-ish, I'm like, well, we'll start to kind of think about maybe saving and how that'll go. And I was fortunate at the time. Like I was I at that point had really good experience. I had my CFA designation done.
Okay, you got that done.
Effectively I'd worked at a credit rating agency through the the credit crisis, right? Like it's called that. So it's a very unique and very sought after skill set. So
interesting.
I went from DBRS, where I was writing rating reports, to working at Sun Life for their investment management group. Effectively, I was the recipient of those reports. I would read those same reports and
make
then
decisions.
And I would take that information along with what's available in the marketplace, and then we would put together trade ideas. Basically, we should have X millions of this company. We should stay away from this company. This company is undervalued. This company's overvalued. Don't go there. This company is there's this geopolitical or whatever risk with this company that's not being factored in. So that kind of all plays into.
Yeah, and the whole purpose of this is an analyst position, I guess. Is that what
it's an analyst role, but you're what's called on the buy side. So you as I kind of described to Lisa, like you're in the pot, like you're with the fund runners, the pot runners, who actually, so you're actually managing money. And Sun Life, they manage money to hedge their liabilities. And they manage pension money as well too. So they're fairly large portfolios, and they're fairly sizable positions that they're buying.
Very very large.
Yeah.
The whole purpose, your purpose, is to mitigate risk, right?
Right.
So that they're taking a reasonable amount of risk.
Right. Yep.
And they get all of the information that they could possibly have, which is what we want everybody to have when they're investing too. But it's hard for everybody to have all of the information and not spend their whole day doing what you did, looking at things, financial things, when they have other jobs and they do other things, right? So like we can't be as good at investments, but you were doing this for your job. So then did that apply to your personal? Did that change your perspective? Like I should be saving, but I should also be putting it in all these things that I know.
So, and I mentioned we did own 2 or 3 rentals in Hamilton at a certain point in time, and how it changed my perspective is I was very well adept at what's involved in being highly leveraged. So I was not uncomfortable with saying, well, you can leverage your money to buy an asset so long as it has stable and predictable cash flow that goes along with it.
What has that? I mean, real estate technically.
Real estate is a fairly. Real estate in a certain area around a university, I would argue, is like well up there. Because
nothing is of course nothing is always stable and predictable.
For sure,
except for a GIC or maybe a really good bond.
Yeah, relatively stable. Not by no means guaranteed.
Yeah.
But given the area, given the kind of streets you're at, you were like, okay, well, yes, you do have a fairly large mortgage, but you also do have fairly healthy cash flows that even if you do have a few vacancies, it's not going to blow you out of the water.
And you're doing this analysis, of course.
Right.
So how many did you end up buying? Like, this
3,
is you or you and your parents?
This is a combination of both at different times.
Okay, so now you're putting in capital that you've saved up.
No. Not really, because 0% down.
Oh, you don't even have to do this.
You didn't really have to at a certain time.
Yeah, of course. So if you know the real estate market, if you already have a property, this is what happened in the States too, right? Yeah. It's like people already have one, might as well get the one next door, and then that one, and then the other one.
Yeah, it's a cash flow game.
Wow.
You're just looking at your mortgage payments, your interest costs, your utilities, your taxes, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, making sure they're covered.
Yeah, the only reason it works and the reason why you can make the argument that you could do it 1 or 2 or a few different times is because you have the probability that you're right next door to a university. You're not kind of in a random area. You're always going to have a flow of people. And really the biggest factor in that was actually incoming students relative to just on-campus student housing. So like it's not even just a general sort of equation about where your revenues are coming from. You're looking at the situation where at the time, post double cohort, right, you have kind of a flood, and you still have this emphasis on post-secondary education. You have a lot of students out there.
Can you explain that double cohort?
The double cohort for, what it is,
Ontario,
right?
Just for everybody.
So in Ontario in 2004, they OAC.
So we did OAC, Ontario Academic Credits,
which is phenomenal.
Which is grade 13.
Grade 13.
They're the ones that you need to get into university, and they switched over, and everybody got a little bit younger.
They switched over, so everybody. So the year that there's 1 year that graduated that had 1 year that graduated at grade 13, and one that graduated at grade 12 at the same time. So you literally have double the people.
Because they got rid of grade 13 and they just had university level courses in grade 12. Is that
I guess so.
How it kind of went? Yeah, which others can explain because we weren't in it.
Yeah.
But so you had like double the amount of people coming through. And then they continued. They lived. They didn't go away. Yeah. It wasn't just 1 year.
Yeah, it just said this flood of people looking for student houses.
And so the university the university here didn't keep up. I know they were building them at Western. That's where I went. Well, they were building more residencies.
Yeah, I mean they try to, but I mean trying to do these fairly large infrastructure projects like building an apartment residence or building it's still takes some time.
And not everyone wants to live in residence. So you have off campus or on what is
off campus,
slightly off campus.
Yeah.
It's like near campus. It's very
10
close.
minute walk from campus.
Very close to campus. And so, how many did you get? How many properties?
For 2 years, we had 3 properties, and then we're like, this is way too much.
That's like 15 people, probably.
Yeah, it was 18 different sets of headaches.
18 people.
18. It's 3 different physical assets to try and take care of. And at that time, my career was starting to get more involved, and we just didn't. It was just too much. So,
and it's the thing about that is that it can become it can feel like a full-time job, but it's not income now. It's income, like it might be income now, depending on your mortgage, but it's probably a little income now, but like much income later. And so it's like you can't really justify spending all of your time on it because it's not like it's a full-time job and you go, I'll just take the money from the properties, right?
Yeah. Well, truly, we intended them to be long-term holdings. It was never like we think that the market's going to skyrocket or we're going to make a whole. It was like
this is passive income.
It's passive.
Or it will be.
Well, it's quasi-passive income.
Yeah.
You still have to do a little bit of work to get it filled, but not a lot.
Yeah, quasi.
But eventually, somebody's going to people are paying down your mortgage, and that's all it is. It's like the model. The model was literally raise house prices by inflation. The mortgage goes down after 30, 35 years. Great. You have an asset which is fully paid off for which you didn't put a whole lot down.
Well, yeah, and you had that benefit. So when did you actually buy them?
2000 and I guess like 6 would have been the second, and 2008 would have been the third, and the third was sold fairly quick. The third, we were just like, this is nuts. Yeah.
And they changed the mortgage rules after that.
And the mortgage rules started to get tighter and tighter, like
after the
sequentially.
Crisis.
Yes, yeah.
Because even though we didn't get as hit like the States did, and I mean, so many banks closed, but still, everyone realized how stupid this was.
Yeah.
So even like. It seems like you would have passed the test, better than others, and maybe you could have dealt with an increase in interest rates better than others, since you already had property and you have income, but some people were just buying things with no ability to pay any more than that. Like, they had no wiggle room.
It's no income, no jobs or assets, ninja loans, which was like one of the kind of hot phrases from the financial crisis. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of insane things that happened in the States. The mortgage rate resets where you're interest only for like 6 months, and then you have to, and then they'd be like, oh, you can just refinance after 6 months, and then you couldn't refinance, and then you're paying a full rate, which was 3 times the amount. So there's a lot of stuff that as Canadians we should legitimately be thankful that have been in place. Doesn't matter which, and I don't even know which government. I don't care which government put it in, but we just have a far more conservative, far more prudent financial system, and it's served us well. Even though at times I think it's gone, kind of on the edge here or there.
Yeah, but we definitely lucked out, in the whole North America financial crisis scheme of things. We did all right. So we're at. You say you have your student loans are paid off?
They're gone. They go pretty quickly.
You're at Sun Life?
So by the time I got to Sun Life, I was in a kind of a far better financial position, just subsequently continued to do well career-wise. I wasn't that, I think by a few years in there, I was a little bit like, I'm not sure if I want to do this for my entire career. And truly what I really wanted to do was more on the advisory side. So we kind of talked like last time we talked, we were talking about, are there other experiences as a person of color that, you or a perspective that you've got. And I went away thinking about it, and I was like, I stayed completely away from doing like client facing work on an advisor side, because I was like, well, how am I going to make this successful? Like it's
really?
a sales. Oh yeah. First of all, it's entirely a sales role.
Yeah.
You go in there and I think at the time the bank advisor jobs were like $27K your first year, and then they would get rid of it entirely the second year. You were completely on commission.
Oh, wow.
So you had to go out there and you had to sell. You had to dial. You had to find and build your book. And I was like, what? Where?
Yeah.
Like my dad's friends who come over and play dominoes on Sunday. Like,
so you feel like you had a network or the ability to do it.
I didn't feel like I had the ability to firstly be successful based on the network that I had. Secondly, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be successful. People, when it comes to money, want to be working with someone that they're comfortable with.
Sure.
And I was like, especially when you're trying to get bigger books of business, I was just like, I'm not sure how this works out. So that's just like a, not a direct experience. It's never
so on the same lines as your dad saying, hey, maybe we should buy a house because you may not be able to get a rental.
Yeah.
You're thinking, well, I should play it safe and not go out there because I might run into things that, are going to work against me.
Perhaps.
You weren't sure.
Perhaps, yeah.
I mean, jumping ahead or in hindsight, but like how valid was that at the time?
I don't think people would disagree with that rationale.
Okay.
But it strikes me as kind of illuminating. You just don't see that many people of color doing like front-end advised jobs. It's a little bit better now.
Yeah.
It's a little bit better now. And overall, like, I kind of observe and have been a part of, kind of small organizations that focus on, people of color working in the financial services industry. The Canadian Association of Urban Financial Professionals is a fantastic group that I've been a part of for quite some time. We looked at, what are the reasons? And I think the industry, wants more diversity, not just people of color, like LGBTQ folks, like everyone, just not your, like, it's an industry that realized, like, okay, not everyone who's doing a frontline advisor job can be your silvered hair, heterosexual white male, able-bodied white male. Like the same thing over and like they realized they couldn't do that. They're like, okay, we want to have a more diverse workforce, and well, we're not sure exactly how to do that. And I think also on this sort of interest side, the supply side, I think a lot of young people who are not in that demographic were kind of like, well, I don't see myself represented in these roles. Like that's not a career for me. So you don't get a whole lot of people. Like like out of grad class of 300 people at Mac. Yeah. 2-3 black people.
Yeah. There's one black person in my wife's medical school. Yeah. Class. Like that's 500 people. Yeah. Right. So that seems it seems strange to me. I mean, we're multicultural, Toronto, anyway. Yep. But the financial services, to get back to that, financial services and front facing. This is only 10 years ago. Yeah. And is it still like this?
It's gone better, no doubt. Like it's gone better, and there are people who are around, but it's a slow process. It's a generational change. I think. Folks in the financial services industry, I think more senior level people would like to see that change happen faster. I'm sure they have it on a scorecard somewhere, like they're tracking diversity, and they'd love to see that tick higher every year sequentially. But I think it just takes time where people who they can see themselves in that role as a person of color or just anyone who it doesn't sound like a career that's available. I went to the same organization, the Association of Urban Financial Professionals. They had an executive from TD who told a story about being at Regent Park. Yeah. He's talking to a group of students, just kind of saying, well, have you ever considered financial services as a career? And he was really moved by the fact that a lot of them were like, well, those are off limits to like they kind of said that.
They said that?
Yeah, they
and these are young kids.
They're young kids, and they're like, that's not for us. Meanwhile, he's like, I'm literally turning around, looking at the skyline, like the Toronto high-rise corporate buildings, and he was very moved by the fact that he's like, this is the first time I really kind of realized that there's this huge barrier. He's 2 blocks away. He's like, I was talking like Queen and Sherbourne, right? Like it's not, it's not the other side of the planet. No. Like it's a block away.
They're right there. Yeah, Regent Park is right beside the some of the biggest buildings in the whole country. It's financial buildings.
Totally.
And they look at those and say, that's not for me.
Absolutely.
And
they don't see themselves in that.
And so do we have to change those perceptions first and then go and break through? Well, how do we change?
I think there's an all of the above answer. And I think what that is partly industry kind of saying, well, and they do a better job of this now. It's not the nepotism like shit show that like is the current Doug Ford government where you can like play lacrosse and get an agent's general job. it's not that. It's a lot more like meritocratic now, I think.
Yeah.
And, so that's
Okay.
an okay improvement. I think there's an improvement in just the regular sort of media landscape. People are seeing different people show up. I certainly remember the portfolio managers on BNN when I was growing up. Some of them eventually got to meet. I was like, well, yeah, I remember these guys. I was like, oh, like that's neat. Like maybe I can kind of do this. And then also, we're in an era obviously of like social media where you have different voices out there, voices that don't have the traditional sound of, your kind of financial services representative or person, whatever.
Yeah.
Hopefully that inspires people to kind of look at financial services in a different way. I think it is, but I think, the product of that, it takes time for that to really show up.
That's it. It all comes back to the runway where it's like, okay, let's get more people of color in financial services. Okay, well, that starts with these kids in Regent Park, right?
Yeah.
Or even before that, right? It starts like the runway that white people have, or like white males in this case, is so long, and it's just no question. I would never have questioned whether I could do something,
Right.
And it's something that it's just I don't even know what that's like.
Yeah.
Like that's how different, right? This is. It's like it sounds like we had very similar like middle class,
Yeah.
right? Like my dad was a dentist, so let's just say upper middle class, but still, like it's like I had student loans. I didn't qualify for OSAP, right? Same thing, right?
Yeah.
I had 25 grand. I had a gambling addiction. Well, that's neither here nor there. But I had to go to a bank too, and I had student loans. But I never had any of this stuff. It's crazy to me that you are already working in financial services, and you're thinking, this is why I can't do front face. Not because I don't want to, not because I don't think I'm going to be good at it.
Yeah, not definitively, but I was highly suspicious.
Right?
I didn't see anybody else doing that and successfully.
So what did you do?
I say mostly back office. Just did researchy type work.
The whole time at Sun Life?
My entire financial career, I would say, was not client facing. I got to a point where I did feel like I could do client facing work and be successful at it. I just didn't want to do it for them.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, okay, now I'm trying to figure out, well, how do I navigate this landscape of going out on my own? Because at the time, we would have had the same types of friends just being like, hey, like, can you explain to me what an ETF is?
Yeah.
Do you have a line of credit?
Right.
Like, what's the interest rate? And
everyone has these questions.
They have all these questions, and then they just bury them in like a corner of shame. I guess everybody thinks that everybody else knows stuff, and it's just not true. Everybody has all of these questions, and so I would be hanging out with friends, and they'd be like, "Hey, what's I read about or I heard about all these things." I'm like, "What? Really? Like you're, like there's a need for that. Like I didn't realize, what a huge need there was at the time. So I just kind of started to give casual advice to friends about, like not, hey, here's which stock to buy, but
here's the basics.
You can open a brokerage account on your own if you'd like to. If you have X amount of dollars, then that is a good enough amount to look for a house.
Yeah.
But it still carries on today. And like there was a client of mine who, between the two of them, had saved $150,000 for a down payment in Toronto.
Oh my God!
So they had done all the right things.
Yeah,
I actually think it was more. I can't remember. Like I just remember just being blown away, and then just being like, we were so embarrassed to ever talk to anyone because we thought we were doing everything wrong. Everybody else in the area is clearly doing things right. They're buying houses. We can't afford one. And I was like, holy shit, like you guys have done everything right. And the fact that you're getting outbid on an $800,000 or $900,000 place, like that's Toronto, but nobody took the time to kind of say like that's not normal. That's
it definitely didn't feel normal when there was 7 people showing up and at a house when we were bidding.
Yeah, and
we thought we got it, and then somebody just like, I don't know, they bring flowers or donuts or something. I don't know.
It's I think this happens nowadays, and someone explained it to me this way, is that people buy payments. And what they meant is that it's not that you buy a house at a certain price.
Yeah.
You buy a payment stream. So in other words, nobody really cares nowadays whether it's 800 or 850,000.
Yeah.
You probably have a real estate agent who's going, hey, that 50 grand is only like $180 extra per month. Go for it. Just go for it. And that's where you get this total shit show of stuff going for like 200 over ask. People don't care anymore. It's not about the price. It's about what the cash flow is versus how much you're currently making and expect to make.
I'm working on something in my head. I've been working on it for the past couple of years on how to talk to real estate agents about like not giving terrible advice. Let's max out the line of credit.
Yeah.
To get more money, borrow from all these people. You need to, then you'll get it, and then you'll have this like golden asset that can never fail. So all of the things you did will be totally worth it.
Yeah.
This is the speech that they give.
They're not incentivized to
That
and I think it comes down to that.
And I think we need to start having this conversation more. You know, now everybody pretty much knows the banks are not like your friends, right? Like they're just selling products, and you put your money there, they lend it out, they sell you investments, they don't care, right? They're just trying to make money like everyone else. I think we need to have the conversation about real estate agents too, in that, hey, they don't, like, they might seem that they have your best interests in mind, but like you need to be on top of stuff too, because they're also trying to make commission. It's their job to sell houses. Yeah. So like, we need to wrap our heads around this, because like I think people think, oh, you know, the real estate agent knows what I want, and no, you should know what you want.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I would love for people who are selling product at banks or real estate agents to have your best interests, you know, at the forefront. I don't think that's going to change. I'm sort of bored with the idea that it would ever change, and I think people just need to get their shit together. Like, if you're buying a house and know your limits, don't deviate from that. Obviously, somebody's going to tell you to bid more or stretch your limits.
Stop listening to everybody else.
Yeah.
So you're not about like, let's change the system, and let's, you know, the banks need to be better or the real estate agents need to be better. We need to be better. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, the system's rigged for the banks to make the most money possible. Like, that shouldn't be. Nobody should be offended by that like phrase. People who work at banks, it's not an attack on you specifically. That's how it's rigged. They have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders to maximize shareholder value.
Yeah.
Period. That's real. So know how the system works. Like, you know how people are incentivized, why someone, you know, behind the desk, as nice as they might be, and as much as they want to do the right thing for you, they might be in a system where they are not necessarily going to give you the most optimal advice. That's how it is. And again, sort of bored with, you know, complaining about it.
Yeah.
I see it in the Twitterverse, like, and I'm like, yeah. Like, it's they don't have your best interests, but like, do something about it.
Yeah.
I'm sort of bored. Oh, good. I can go on a whiny rant, and then hopefully I'll stop after like 3 minutes. But I'm kind of bored of the, like, you know, Toronto home prices are what they are. Like, yes, they are expensive, but have you heard of Hamilton?
Yeah. Because
everything is literally like 40% cheaper.
Or Guelph.
Guelph is fantastic. I visited a client at Scarborough Guildwood. I don't know if you've been there. It's phenomenal. Like, there are all these communities. Like when my wife and I were like, you know, kind of screw the corporate world mentality, we looked at Prince Edward County.
Yeah.
There's places, and if you don't need to necessarily physically be at your place of employment 5 days a week, maybe you can telecommute, maybe it can be 2 or 3. Maybe you can be completely remote, which is what the FIRE crowd, I think that's a big part of what they do. Then why not check out somewhere else that has housing costs and costs of living, you know, that are like 60, 70% cheaper than Toronto. You can live mortgage free. You can do what you want. And it's not like you do nothing and just sit on your butt, but like you can make a career out of like the job that I have. I don't need to live where I live, you know, to make the job kind of work and to make it work. I have clients throughout the country.
Yeah, so let's talk about what you're doing now. So
sure.
You left Sun Life to do this.
So I left a couple of years ago, and I started my own firm, which is You and Yours Financial. It builds on what my strengths are, which is around the investment universe. It's not, so to be clear, it's not selling financial products at all. Okay. I don't sell products. I legally can't sell products. I'm not regulated.
neither.
Yeah. You know the regulatory kind of side of things, and I provide investment planning services. I do a number of things. First of all, I have something that's called a portfolio second opinion. It's a service by which if people have a portfolio they're not sure about what's in their portfolio, how much in fees that they're paying, which, by the way, I've had a client literally come to me with a portfolio and not know that they were spending like $23,000 per year.
So much
on
value
fees.
that you're providing.
Yeah.
Just in that. And I'm sure like probably so many people,
Yeah.
right?
Same week, next client, $18,000.
Oh.
And telling them like was kind of nauseating because they're like, I'm like, these were your fees. I'm like, no, they're not. Like, I've talked to my advisor. Anyways. So yeah, that's what the portfolio second is. It just kind of like rips open the door on what the portfolio is. The DIT investing service that I offer is one for people who hear about ETFs, they hear about index funds, they want to DIY invest, do-it-yourself invest, they want to open their own brokerage account and select passive investments. Yeah. They want to do so, but they might need a little bit of hand-holding. Sure. So this is not, hey, buy this, buy this, buy this. This is, here's how you open up a brokerage account. Here are the discount brokerages that are available to you. Here's how to read, a quarterly statement. Yeah. Here's how you make your a trade. There's this box here, which is the quantity, and this is what a market order is. It's coaching them through that process.
Do it together?
Do it together.
I've been thinking about that for the last 15 seconds.
Yeah. Yep. Do it together. It's an interesting program. A lot of people are super interested in it, but a lot of people kind of decide, well, I'm not sure if that's for me, if they're interested in like the emotional weight of managing their own investments.
Yeah, but some people are, and you're right, they just need a helping hand. It's really hard to jump into it, but you might really like it. So
totally.
That's a great option. So
totally.
DIT and
third one is investment planning. It's a little bit more in depth in terms of covering the information from people, but we get a whole bunch of information. Look at their short and long term goals. Look at the assets that they have in the different accounts, RSP, TFSA, non-registered. Look at their employment, how much they spend, how much they save, and then try and project that out over a number of years. Try and answer some questions like, can you afford to buy a house? Can you consider retiring at age 60? Are you on track to? Could you retire early? If you have excess money, should you pay down your mortgage or invest? So it gives people like a good gut check on the direction that they're headed. And I think a lot of people find a lot of value in that because they I think what qualifies as a quote financial plan, when you talk to someone at the bank, I mean, again, they're not paid to do that. That's an expense. No. They're not getting compensated for that. And, they get a lot more insight and detail. It forms the basis for a conversation and a relationship so that they have someone to ask from an independent standpoint. Like, they feel a lot more confident asking me a question when I don't have to necessarily, push a product, or I don't have a quota to meet, or I don't have a sales target or anything. It's like, hey, let's talk about how to screw off for a year and go traveling. Like, I don't want to just like build my investments for forever and forever. Like, this is what I want to do. And it's like, okay, well, I don't have a bias towards that person investing because I collect commissions from that, or collect more the more assets under management I have. I'm like, great, let's talk about how to get you like away from your job and traveling for a year. Or let's talk about how you can start drawing on your portfolio now to support your retirement if you they want to leave their work early. That's
not about products. It's about your lifestyle and what you want to do. And everyone is different. This is really great. So what's the name of the company again?
You and Yours Financial.
Okay, and I know we have a million other things that we can talk about too. But definitely. I think that's we got to wrap it up for today. I always want people to come and tell their origin story. I think that's key. And I'm realizing now that so many guests have so much more to say. By the time we get to like telling their story. And so I'm already planning follow-up episodes with so many people now, because it's like there's so much value that you can add, and now that we got to know you and we know a little bit of what you're doing, and then hopefully we can hear from you more.
For sure. I would love to be back. I love Hamilton. Hanging out at Collective Arts for
thanks for coming to the studio. It makes it so much easier for me. You have a young baby as well, so we're in the same boat. Yeah. But I appreciate that, because all of my stuff is here. All of my equipment is here. So, the website?
youandyoursfinancial.com.
Perfect.
And at Darryl C.A. Brown on Twitter, 2HoursYL.
Okay, so Darryl,
Yep.
C.A. Brown. Well, thanks for coming, Darryl. This was great. Great conversation. And, we're going to hear more from you in the future.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite. Thanks.
And that was episode 93 with Darryl Brown. If you like the podcast and want to see me get to episode 100 and beyond, please support the podcast by going to my Patreon site and becoming a patron. It's only a few bucks a week, but if enough people do it, it starts to add up. So head over to patreon.com/BoHumphreys if you're interested. That's it for this episode. I'll be back next week with creator and co-host of the Stacking Benjamins show and Money in the Morning, Joe Saul-Sehy.